Is drinking raw milk safe like RFK Jr. suggests? Can you reduce a glucose spike if you eat your food in, quote-unquote, the right order? I'm registered dietitian Abby Sharp. I host a nutrition myth-busting podcast called Bite Back with Abby Sharp, and those are just some of the questions I tackle with qualified experts on my show. There is so much food misinformation and disinformation out there, and it can feel impossible to know what's real and what's BS. On Bite Back, my goal is to help listeners create a pleasurable relationship with food, their body, and themselves, which in my opinion is the fundamental secret to good health. Listen to Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts.
Just sending a last-minute email in, looking for our first guest, and again, just kind of doing two jobs at once here, trying to keep all the balls in the air. There, perhaps, is our first guest, I should say. There's a little bit of a rough start. Welcome to the show, everybody. We appreciate it very much. I'd like to thank Veinotte and that's on the other side of the glass, the control boards. Doing a fine job as always. It is a Wednesday. That means that our call-in segment goes from noon until 1 today because we've got Dr. John Gillis who will join us from 11 until 12, taking your health-related questions or concerns, of course. So if you have a health-related concern or question, a great opportunity to ask the doctor to get his advice. Always a wealth of knowledge and information. Again, house calls with Dr. Gillis goes from 11 until 12, and from noon until 1 year calls. We will interrupt the call-in segment. Not interrupt's not the right word. We will include, I should say, a chat with Tony Mancini, the Deputy Mayor of Halifax, represents District 6 as well, to talk about his motion, which passed after lengthy debate. A series of motions at HRM Council meeting last night to have city staff study bike lanes in the municipality. Staff will now conduct a study of proposed bike lanes for the fiscal years 2026 through 2029, including cost estimates. The report will also look at alternative network solutions that could lower cost, which are now estimated to stretch into $90 million, or $90 million range, I should say. And as I've said before, left unchecked, that number would do nothing but go up, in my humble opinion. So, how is this different than what the mayor proposed a couple of weeks ago? Well, according to some councillors, it's different because it does not deal with congestion or does not include congestion or addressing that issue. Instead, it looks at cost savings and costs in general. So, that is, I suppose, an inherent difference. I find that it's telling that Tony Mancini's motion passed and Andy Fillmore's did not. Anything to read into that? I'm not sure if there is or not, but perhaps there is. And also, did council get this right? Is it good that council will look at this issue for 2026 through 2029 and the costs? Of the escalating costs? I think that it's prudent, fiscally prudent, and I think it would be irresponsible to not do this when you look at the amount of cost overruns that are incurring or would have incurred, and again, it would have done nothing but balloon from that. So that's something that I'll get your take on, again, when we open the phone lines between noon and 1. Also, NATO leaders a gathering in the Netherlands to decide whether to more than double the alliance's defense spending target from 2% of GDP to 5%. And Mark Carney is talking about this, says that I think the number was something like $150 billion this would cost the Canadian government when you do the equation of GDP ratio. And look, I find it interesting that we're even talking about this, considering that we've never even gotten to the 2%, not even close to the 2% in modern history, despite governments promising and committing to do so for decades now. So we haven't been able to get to 2%. Suddenly we're going to get to 5%. I don't know. I suppose making commitments way down the road, 10 years down the road, gives the government of the day flexibility to wiggle out of it. Or, look, Mark Carney won't be the prime minister in a decade or whatever. So what the hell, right? Make the commitment and say that they'll do it and then don't deliver. That's basically been the modus operandi for governments for a long time, going back to Stephen Harper and before Stephen Harper. It's not just Liberal governments. Conservative governments have done the same thing. But nonetheless, do you support an exponential increase in military spending? And where will that money come from? Because it's got to come from somewhere, right, folks? There's only so much money out there when it comes to the federal government and what it can do and what it can fund. So do you support increasing defense spending exponentially up to 3.5% and eventually 5%? And lots of other things to get to as well I've got in the pile, and look forward to hearing from you, as mentioned, between noon and 1 today when we open the phone lines. All right, this story, I saw it in the Chronicle Herald this week. A Halifax politician is calling further delays in a school construction project in her riding unacceptable. Joining us to discuss all this is NDP MLA Suzy Hansen. Suzy, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
All right. So also, I'm going to ask you about a release out this morning in which you talk about environmental racism recommendations and the government's lack of response to that as well. But first, let's get into this. So for those who don't know the background on what you're talking about at the school, where it is and all that, fill everybody in on the background, please.
Well, the school has been a staple in our community. St. Joseph St. McKay has been around since before the Halifax explosion, but most recently it was demolished in 2022, expected to reopen 23-24. And it had needed multiple upgrades and infrastructure work, and finally it was approved for a part of the capital plan to be rebuilt.
Okay, so what's been the delay, and just fill everybody in on what's happened with the delays?
Well, that's a good question. We don't know what the delay is at this point right now. We are told that it's, they're working around the clock. They're trying to do their best. But this is one delay too many. I think, parents and community and students deserve to have a safe and welcoming school in their community, and that's exactly what they deserve. So there have been multiple delays, and we need to address the reasoning why, but as well, it needs to get done. School needs to be built. Okay,
so tell us about what this has been like and what you're hearing from constituents and parents.
Well, parents and students and as well staff are frustrated at the fact that this is once again another delay. And the timing is absolutely unacceptable. When we think about school will start up in September, we weren't giving any indication that there was going to be another delay. So this needs to be a priority for this government to make sure that the school will be reopened as soon as possible.
What is the government saying about this?
They're saying they're doing whatever they can. They're working round the clock. That is what the Department of Public Works is saying, and they're trying their best. There's no timeline. There's no reasoning. There's no community conversations. Our community deserves better, and I think that we've waited far too long for a school to be reopened, and they should make this a priority.
Okay, you mentioned in the story that perhaps other affluent areas might not be going through the same thing.
Well, we've seen across the province, in other areas, and especially in HRM, that schools are being built in a faster timeline than our school here.
Okay, so might it be just tenders or the contractors, or I suppose when it comes to the delays, might it be just bad luck?
Well, you know what? I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't want parents to think that, because of bad luck that a school's not going to be built. I think, this also raises the questions why we are not actually having our school built on time. Why are these delays happening? Like, this delay is not the first. It's like multiple delays and upsets and letdowns for the community. And we deserve more. We deserve to be a priority. So where there's a will, there's a way. and we can actually do the work. And if it means that we have to pull people from different job sites, then so be it. We need to figure it out. And that's where Public Works come in. They have the expertise. They could do that. But it shouldn't be at a detriment to our students. It shouldn't be at a detriment to our staff or our community, because we deserve to have a school, and we've deserved it for many years now.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is that contractors and those who get the tenders to do this work in this particular group, marker group, $45.7 million proposal, perhaps they're to blame. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
No, government should have been on top of this. You know, when we think about what we pay folks to do the work, I think that should be the priority. And as someone who's paying for the work, we should be on top of why it's not being done in a timely manner. We were given timelines as a community. We were given, a set time when things were going to be done and when things were going to be built, and it should be following through with those types of plans.
Okay, let's shift gears and talk about this release out concerning environmental racism. The Premier must release a report, act on environmental racism recommendation. Did this again from the NDP. So first of all, tell us about the report that you're looking for.
Well, it's the Environmental Racism Panel has put together a report with some recommendations to address some of the environmental harms that have happened across the province. And we haven't seen anything that these recommendations had been put forward. And I've spoken to multiple ministers who have said, some have said they're going to implement it across departments. Some have said they haven't read it, or they don't know, or they haven't seen it, or they. It's a lot of mixed messaging. So I think, it's important for us to be transparent and open to the community and the public, in which, the communities have given their input, have given their information on how these harms have affected their communities. And we need to be able to make sure that we are following through with whatever those recommendations are at all levels of departments.
All right. Give us some examples of environmental racism here in the province, some of the more recognizable examples.
Well, in Africville was a community next to it. Well, a dump was placed into their community, as well as a number of other environmental harms through their water and other parts. And that was just the most recent that I could think of. But there's also Shelburne, there's Lincolnville, there's Boat Harbor, and I know you know about Boat Harbor and the harms that has had on their communities. There's a lot of communities that have a legacy of these environmental harms, and the recommendations are to help us not do that anywhere else in Nova Scotia, and to help protect other communities, and specifically Black and Indigenous communities where we know that these things have happened.
All right. In your release this morning, you said that the Houston government's contradicted themselves or itself multiple times on this file. Can you give me examples of that?
Well, Deputy Premier Adams said that all government departments are using the report and recommendations of the Environmental Racism Panel in the work, and that was in the House when she spoke that. Yet, in public accounts, the Deputy Minister of Public Works said no one in the room had seen the recommendations. I spoke to the Minister of Justice, who's responsible for the panel's work. She won't confirm whether or not she's even read them. So for me, I think that those are many contradictions in which, we want to make sure that we have the public's trust and that Nova Scotians believe in the work that we're going to be doing. And we can't do that when they don't even know what they're doing.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Sorry. And Premier Houston created the panel, and the work needs to be public.
Yeah, why it makes people kind of question as to why would it not be public? What would be the reason to not release it?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
We don't know either. That's why I asked the Premier. I went directly to the top, because at the end of the day, I'm running around asking all the ministers, and they're passing the buck. And now we're finding out that some of them have read it, some of them haven't, and they're making up things that we just don't know are true or not, because we don't know what the recommendations are. So we would like to be able to see that so that we can make an idea and have an idea of how we want to move forward.
All right. Who prepared the report?
It was called the Environmental Racism Panel, and they were compiled of community members, compiled of experts, and other academic folks throughout the province, and they were put together and put together some recommendations on what we could be doing to address environmental racism. When
was the report and recommendations finalized?
I believe it was in July of last summer.
Okay, so June or July of last summer, and the government's been sitting on this and not releasing it, and not releasing recommendations, and not giving any reason as to why. Is that
absolutely?
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah. See, to me, that doesn't make any sense.
I agree.
All right. So, any word from the government of the day on this, and whether or not they'll comply and release this? Have they given any timeline commitments or anything at all?
Well, we haven't heard anything back, but as you know, I put forward this release to the Premier, so I'm hoping to hear from the Premier, and we'll be watching and as well asking other questions about what we're going to be able to see and how we're going to be able to receive this information. So We're hoping that we can get it.
Yeah, to me, by not releasing it and not moving on it and not even talking about it, you mentioned some cabinet members of cabinet may not even read it. To me, it just speaks to that it's obviously not a priority.
Absolutely. And now we're having other organizations and groups. The Mi'kmaq Chiefs have actually asked for it to be made public. So, it's not just myself who's asking for this. The communities are asking. And I think that's the value in making sure that we have this information public for folks, because they've been expecting for it to be public. When you ask communities to give of themselves and to give their, to speak of their traumas and talk about the things that are happening in their communities, there's an expectation of you to move and show them that there's actions going to be made. And if you're not even willing to show us this information or make it public to show that you're doing your due diligence, there's questions there, right? And so we'll be watching and waiting and hope for the best, right? Hope to get this information back.
Okay, Suzy, appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Oh, well, thank you so much. You have a good day.
All right, take care. Suzy Hansen, NDP MLA, and lots to talk about there for sure. Perhaps some of these things you might want to discuss when we open the phone lines, as mentioned, between noon and 1 today. Talking about NATO leaders and hitting the GDP of 3.5%, now 5% goal. We'll discuss this and what's going on with Iran with Scott Taylor when we come back. All right, joining us for a chat is Scott Taylor of Esprit de Corps Magazine in Ottawa. Scott, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Always a pleasure.
All right, you're en route to our fine province. Is that correct?
Looking forward to it, but I understand you're in the same heat wave. We're still stuck in here in Ottawa.
I know. What for pleasure or work when you're out here?
Always for both. You can't come to Nova Scotia and not have pleasure.
That's exactly right. Okay, let's talk about, first of all, let's get into the NATO summit and a lot of commitments about GDP spending, and this is the topic of the day for sure. And Mark Carney is mused about 3.5% and now 5%, which I find kind of funny considering we've struggled to get to 2% and not even close to 2%. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it was Carney the banker did the math, and he realized it's going to be like $150 billion in defense spending, and that's year on year. I mean, that's to get to 5%. So I think there's going to be an awful lot of creative accounting for everybody involved. I mean, there's just no way you can start pouring that into, all the ground forces and air forces and equipment, and we just don't have the personnel. I mean, we're 14,000 personnel short of what we should have, which is about 65,000 regulars. So, I mean, we just don't have the manpower. And then the idea of spending all that, it's got to come at the expense of something. I mean, it's going to be healthcare, it's going to be education or something. Like, that's a lot of cheese, man. So I think that they've agreed to that amount. Canada agreed to 2%. We never got to 2%. And it will be a struggle to even get to 2 and stay at 2.
Okay, so what's the time horizon that the commitment is made for it at 3.5 and then 5%? Is there a time horizon on this?
So for the 2%, we looked at first it was going to be 2030 and then or 2032, and then they upped it to 2030, and then this year we had the June 9th announcement by Prime Minister Carney that just said we're going to get to 2% right away. We're going to open the purse strings. We're going to give everyone a raise. We're going to do all this. We're going to get that magic number up, include the Coast Guard as the fourth branch, and do some creative accounting to get to 2. And now all of a sudden he's faced with somehow getting to 5 in a yet unspecified period of time. Nobody can ramp up that quickly. Even the Americans, they spend a huge amount. They spend 3.5%. But for them to put that up by another 1.5% would be taxing even on the Americans. So it's a huge, huge number.
All right.
Especially
so
when you've got a rich country like Canada, we've got a huge GDP. That's a lot of money.
Right. So are the commitment to the security of NATO, this seems to be And Europe in general. This seems to be kind of the focus right now is European security. Or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is where they're looking at America being, as Canada does, seeing them as an unreliable partner, certainly for the next 4 years. And we've got President Trump saying he doesn't, has a different interpretation of what Article 5 means for collective defense in the NATO Charter. There is no other interpretation. And collective defense means if one of us is attacked, then everyone comes to our defense. And that's always been the basic principle of NATO. But now we've got Donald Trump saying that may not be the case. He wants to consider his NATO allies as friends, but that's as far as he'll go to, committing to their defense. So the Europeans are looking at going into a Eurocentric, and Canada wants to get on board with them. I mean, that makes perfect sense. And back to the creative accounting thing, one of the things that they're talking about is investment in critical minerals. And Canada could lead the way in that, in the fact that we have huge deposits up in the north of tungsten, which is a very dense metal, which is used very much in armor-piercing ammunition. And right now, most NATO countries that are producing armor-piercing ammunition are getting their minerals from China. I mean, of all people, they're the world's biggest producer. Canada, just because of the cost simply of extracting it, has been prohibitive. But we even have a town in the north called Tungsten, because it was once a mine. So it's possibly the silver lining here would be that we would start to be creative and dedicating resources into building infrastructure, which we could then deem to be defensive in nature, in terms of being able to operate and to open up in terms of transportation our north, as opposed to just simply buying bombs and bullets.
All right. How about defense of this continent and partnering with the United States and the Golden Dome, I guess, and that side of it? It's
a ridiculous notion, and it's been floated. I mean, for some time it was space wars under Ronald Reagan. That was part of the reason that they bankrupted the Soviet Union. Is like, if we're going to spend all this on defense on both sides, if we don't have mutually assured destruction, or MAD, as they say, if one side is impervious to the other side's retaliation, then it's no longer MAD. It's that you can bully them, and we're seeing that with the current conflict in Iran. Israelis and the Americans combined have shown that they can do what they want, and that they're then impervious to retaliation, pretty much, in terms of conventional long-range missiles and drones. So and that makes things actually probably more dangerous and less stable. Now that they've shown Iran to be a toothless tiger with their conventional means, they're going to resort to other methods. Nothing ever gets resolved in the Middle East, as we've seen over the decades and centuries. Things just simmer and then they explode at a later date. So this currently, people may seem that if they've knocked out or pushed back Iran's nuclear project by days, weeks, or decades, depending on who you listen to, but they've also shown that they're able to protect themselves and render most of Iran's offensive capability useless. So they're going to probably resort to something else, and we'll not know when the time frame is on that, but they're not going to certainly be satiated by the current turn of events.
Okay, I wouldn't think that it would be too much of a challenge to get to 2% when you look at military procurement alone when it comes to F-35 purchases, with shipbuilding here in Halifax, of course, and other shipbuilding endeavors. And procurement alone in and of itself, that could get us to the 2% pretty easily, could it not?
Well, we could just flush money down the toilet and call it defense spending.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
We don't ever put up what it is we want in terms of a capability. This is the problem with these percentages of GDP. We're wasting a lot of money on things that we don't buy off the shelf, that we invest in Canadian shipbuilding, if you will, and we're going to spend over $100 billion to build 15 frigates. That, in terms of the cost per ton of a warship, is 20 times what the British are paying for their frigates and for their aircraft carriers. Wow. Like it's not even 2 to 1. It's like 20 to 1. So you say, well, okay, but still technically defense spending when we're investing in our industry. That's all well and good, but I mean, there's probably better ways if we were investing in companies to make MRIs or make medical equipment or whatever it is, and we would be globally better positioned than to put all that money into things which just can't be justified to spend that much money on a single warplane or a warship, given what we could be getting. And again, it's in terms of numbers of troops that we're getting in exchange for the amount of money we're spending. If we can't even find the manpower to fill those uniforms, it seems we need to rethink this from a different perspective. You
think that at some point the government of the day, whichever political stripe it might be, might take a hard look at the shipbuilding in Canada in general, or is that something that would be sacrosanct?
Well, I mean, they're looking at getting submarines, and I think they've all realized that there's no way we can make a capability here to invest that much to build a dozen submarines. It would just be astronomical. And you've got countries that are making submarines that are very keen on getting a deal and moving forward with that. So if you look at that, you say, well, okay, at some point, some common sense does prevail. Otherwise someone could say, no, we must build these submarines here in Canada, and the technology transfer and all these things would be so enormous, and it would take us so long, it wouldn't make any sense at all. That said, I mean, with even the current CSC, the new destroyers, the River class that they're building, I mean, I think there's only 3 under contract, and it's something like $21 billion to build 3. So that they may look at canceling or changing down the road if there's a different government.
Wow, very interesting times. All right, Scott, enjoy your time out here and safe travels.
Looking forward to my early morning flight. Okay.
All right, take care. Scott Taylor of Esprit de Corps Magazine in Ottawa. The province needs to update and improve its school capital planning process to account for the unprecedented growth in student enrollment since the process was created. This, according to the latest Auditor General's report. Kim Adair joins the show when we come back. All right, joining us is Nova Scotia's Auditor General, Kim Adair. Kim Adair, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time, of course.
Hi, well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about our report.
Absolutely. So let's talk with the report, and it's concerning capital projects, school capital projects, and enrollment numbers, and an exponential increase in particular in HRM is at the crux of all this. Give everybody kind of the broad strokes of the report first off, if you will.
Sure. So this is a major spend of the taxpayer, school capital projects. So what we're talking about is when there's a decision to build a new school, a replacement school, or major capital improvement. This was looked at about 10 years ago by the previous Auditor General, and the decision-making process behind these big decisions. It's very significant because within the last year, there's been $1 billion announced in various school projects across the province. A good part of it driven by the population increase, the enrollment increase, which you've mentioned. So we wanted to take a look at whether there had been improvements to the process, because 10 years ago, it was a very ad hoc process, not supported by evidence. So we went in and looked at what was behind these recent announcements and found some concerning findings. There was some improvement. In fact, there is a multi-year process when it comes to replacement schools and capital improvements. But when it's what we call a new growth school, like, for example, in the Halifax area, there have been 6 new growth schools announced, largely driven by the enrollment increase. There was very little process behind all of that in terms of why 4 schools that were announced in June of 2023 and what location decisions were made and all of the evidence behind that. We expected to find what we would call a robust evidence-based process supported by a strong analysis for each and every school, but that did not exist. So that's our major concerns.
Okay, so if evidence-based process is not there, then what is there? Is it politics?
Well, that's my concern. I would say we didn't find solid evidence that there's political influence, but the fact we didn't have this evidence to support the decisions, it means there's room for subjectivity to come into play in the decision-making process and or possibly political influence.
Okay, so when it comes to where what gets built and where it gets built, ultimately that would fall upon Cabinet, would it not? And if I'm incorrect, please correct me.
Ultimately, Cabinet, yes. But what we were looking at is the process where the regional centers for education each year, they put forward a proposal based on evidence of need. Mm-hmm. And then there's a departmental committee that evaluates each project and then puts a recommendation forward to the minister, who in turn recommends to Executive Council or Cabinet to make the final decision. So that's the process that we looked at. And like I say, when it comes to replacement schools and major renovations, we did see where the regional centers for education were putting forward those cases. But when it got to the departmental committee, and what they would do is categorize them in terms of low, medium, or high need. And even that is not sufficient because they didn't prioritize them or score them. So it really showed when we looked at 22-23, there were 11 projects considered medium need, and only 2 were put forward. And when we asked, well, why these 2 over the other 9, there was no answer to that question. And it shouldn't be that way, right? There should be a clear process to support, each one that moves ahead in a good scoring system. So we've made a number of recommendations. The department has accepted them all and say that they're going to improve their processes going forward.
Okay, so what's the key piece of, or is there a key piece of empirical evidence? To me, it would be looking at the percent of population growth, and in particular looking at demographics with younger people and enrollment numbers, and that to me would be the main factor here. What, am I correct or incorrect in making that assumption?
Definitely one of the important factors, but there's other factors, and I'll just to give you an indication. Mm-hmm. First, you look at the condition of the facility. Is it right. Aging, and is it at the point that something needs to be done? You look at the capacity of other area schools, and can there be a redistribution of the grade levels or boundary changes to address enrollment challenges? Also need to look at the number of modulars and portables that are in use, and there's been $162 million spent in recent years on housing not housing, but for a capacity of up to 6,000 students. So that's a short-term fix, mm-hmm. but that's not good for the long term. Another thing to consider is housing developments in the area, because intuitively that would drive your enrollment numbers even further. And the other thing is the availability of land where a construction could take place in a reasonable amount of time. When we point out in the report that there's 3 schools that were announced in 2018, so 7 years ago, and there has still been no construction activity because the challenges in getting the land and taking ownership and working with public works. So it's their responsibility for site selection and overseeing the construction. So that was concerning as well, that there's the 2 schools in Cape Breton, and I think the other one is in Halifax, that is moving very slowly, and that needs to be addressed.
Okay, so where is the breakdown the most egregious? Is it at the Regional Center for Education level, or is it after that, and when it gets kind of pushed up the line, and then eventually to the department, and then eventually at the cabinet level? Where does the breakdown happen the most, or does it, or did you measure that?
Let me see. So if you talk about the new growth schools, the major fix that is needed is they need to incorporate the process for those into the multi-year capital plan that they now have. When that capital plan was developed in 2018, it was a situation where the enrollment numbers were rather flat, and it was more of an exercise on school closures. But now it's a whole new ballgame with enrollment projections, 24% increase in the Halifax Regional Center for Education alone. That needs to be incorporated in the process about how to decide on new schools and where they go and what needs to be done to get ready for those. And then when it comes to the major renovations and replacement schools, it's putting in place a scoring process at the department level. So to answer your question, it's at a different level that work needs to be done to improve the process depending on which type of school you're talking about. Is that confusing?
Okay, but is evidence-based where the breakdown is? I would think that at the HRCE level that they would be working with hard numbers when it comes to enrollment. They would know their numbers certainly better than than at the department would, or certainly at the cabinet level would. So where do they do a good job of giving empirical data up to the department level, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. So we saw the proposals being put forward by the regional centers for education, supported by evidence of need, and took into consideration enrollment projections. It's at the departmental level in how they're evaluating these proposals that need improvement. Okay.
And so among your recommendations is who's involved? Is it the department? Is this directed at politicians? Who do the recommendations apply to?
They're all directed to the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development. There is one where they need to consult with the Department of Public Works with regards to the schools that have been delayed for so long.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, our recommendations are always directed to the department, not to the politicians.
Right. But inevitably the politicians have the final say, so they need to be cognizant of this and I guess aware of it and perhaps involved. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. They ultimately make the final decision, but the concern is that the process, given how significant the dollars are here, a new school can be upwards of $100 million, and it's going to impact students for decades ahead. There needs to be a robust, evidence-based process that doesn't have room for subjectivity or political interference or influence. It's big spending, so it needs to be focused on the right school at the right time and for the right reasons.
Okay, listen, I appreciate your time. This report's available for public consumption online, I'm assuming?
Yes, it definitely is on our website.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, take care. Kim Adair, Nova Scotia's Auditor General. Visitation to downtown Halifax surpasses pre-COVID numbers. We'll discuss this when we come back. Downtown Halifax Business Commission released an online version of the 2025 State of the Downtown Report, and some good news, I think, overall for Halifax when it comes to visitation to the region. Paul MacKinnon, Downtown Halifax Business Commission, joins us to talk about all of this. Paul, thanks for joining the show. You're the CEO, I should say, of the commission. Paul, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks. Great. Thanks for having me on, Todd.
All right. So tell us about some of the data. Numbers up 3.1% from pre-COVID numbers, which is positive, I suppose, eh?
Yes. It's been a long time in coming, and I would say the number one thing that we probably care about downtown is people. That's what leads to vibrancy in our downtown. So we've been trying to get back to those pre-pandemic numbers for a number of years now, and we finally hit that. Yeah. So up 3.1% over pre-COVID numbers, but up 18.4% over last year. So definitely we're heading in the right direction. I think we're now the third best recovering downtown in Canada. So yeah, on the people front, it's good news, and you see it if you come downtown, you can kind of experience that that's busier now than it was last year and busier than it was the year before. So that's great to see. Some of that is to do with people coming for events and people coming to enjoy all the things they can enjoy downtown. We do see more people coming back to the office, probably more regularly than they have been for a while, and we see that. Evidence to a decrease in vacancy rates. I think there was a sense that office vacancy would actually increase, but it's actually gone down. It's actually lower now than it was before COVID. So that's an indication that people are still working downtown and people want to have downtown offices. How do
you measure this type of thing? It may seem like a silly question, but how do you get the numbers?
So the numbers are done through it's a company called Enrolment. They track cell phone data. This is how most cities and downtowns track things. So they're not actually when we say 19.2 million, it's not necessarily 19.2 individual people. It's they track cell phones. So if you come downtown and you've got your cell phone set so that your apps are pinging off the cell phone towers, which most people do, that's how we track the numbers. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So when it comes to vibrancy in general, this is obviously good news because this impacts businesses and small businesses and restaurants and all that stuff. So it has a big ripple effect.
It does. The report, there's always a bit of a mix of good and bad news. So the visitation numbers are really good. The bad news is we also monitor sales on an annual basis, and sales are actually slightly down over last year, specifically in the restaurant and the retail industry. So we've had more businesses open up, which is good news, but overall sales are down. And that's not a huge surprise because we're seeing, inflation and recessionary forces and those types of things. So, but what it does mean is there's more people coming downtown and maybe doing things that don't require them to spend as much money. So, whether that's walking the waterfront or taking in a lot of the free stuff that happens downtown. But obviously, we'd love to see those sales figures go up as well.
Okay, you mentioned office workers. There's a move, obviously, to work from home, and we know that there's been different policies from the government here when it comes to provincial employees, union or non-union. But I'm surprised you say that the numbers of people working in the office are up.
Yeah, certainly not up since pre-COVID, but I think since the last couple of years. So I think there's more people. I mean, first of all, there's more employees overall downtown. So downtown businesses continue to hire more people. Now they're not in the office 5 days a week, but what we're seeing from government and from large private sector companies is they're trying to figure out what these hybrid work policies look like. And what we're seeing more and more is that officers are saying, listen, we want you in the office at least 3 days a week, right? So maybe it's not 5 days a week. And I think it was probably closer to 2 days a week a couple of years ago. So I think we're seeing a bit of a shift towards more time in the office than we've seen maybe in a couple of years. But certainly, I don't think we're going back to a situation where people are back to 9 to 5 in the office Monday to Friday. I think those days are over.
Okay, how about residential and the increase in condos and construction, apartment building construction? I would think that as more of these projects get completed, this will increase the numbers as well.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, last week, Halifax Partnership came out with their Halifax Index. And it's been a great source of frustration is between census periods. It's actually not very easy to track population in any sort of good way, but Halifax Partnership has kind of finally cracked that. So they had some good numbers. If you go on their website under the Halifax Index, they've actually got some population projections. We won't get a great estimate until the next census comes, but all indications are that population is growing, and we see that when you drive around. You see a lot of there's still lots of construction happening. And most of those large-scale projects they're mixed use, but they're predominantly residential. So the larger buildings, whether it's downtown or further out on the peninsula. So yeah, definitely there's no question. I mean, we see it. You see it when you're sitting in traffic, Todd, don't you? There's more people in Halifax than ever before, and aside from the fact that people don't like sitting in traffic, it's exciting to see a growing city and growing downtown.
And events like Music Fest going on this weekend, and Comedy Fest, and other events like that. And the tattoos coming up, of course. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention the tattoo. These are all things that add a ton to the vibrancy. And sporting events like the Wanderers and the Tides and the Mooseheads, and I could go on and on and on with that. But it all adds up, right?
It does, and what we see from more through surveys that we do with customers is when we ask people why they come downtown, they're coming down for the waterfront, they're coming down for dining in particular, and they're coming for events. And so our philosophy is the more events, the better. We're involved in a number of those ourselves, whether that's through sponsorship or through organization. We helped organize Fleet Week last week. Like I said, tattoos this weekend. We've got Jazz Festival coming up. It's really a great summer, for kind of revisiting some of those regular events that maybe people haven't been to for a couple of years. So yeah, I would certainly encourage people to get out to the tattoo, come down for the Jazz Festival in a couple of weeks. And we've gone from winter to summer almost overnight. So it's a great time to be down on the waterfront or on Argyle Street or Spring Garden Road. How
about parking? This is an ongoing issue that people have concerns with, but there's ample parking from what I can understand, or when it comes to when you factor in parking garages, and I guess it's a bit of a misnomer that there's no parking downtown.
Yeah, it's always a concern. It's a concern, in any downtown. But yes, we do feel there is ample parking. Maybe sometimes people don't know where it is. So if you go to our ParkSmart site on our webpage, you can find out where you can park, whether that's on street or in garages. But interestingly, we also track the number of on-street sessions because the city provides that information. We actually had fewer people parking downtown this past year, but more people coming downtown overall. So we have to kind of dig into what that means. Does that mean? I mean, I think what it means is people are coming in different ways, whether that is through the transit system or they're walking more, or maybe coming after hours when they don't have to pay for parking. So that's an interesting little bit of a conundrum to figure out. And so in future years, we'll have much better data on traffic patterns and cycling and some of those other methods or modes of coming downtown.
How about commercial property assessments? Can you release some data about that? What's some of the information concerning that?
Yeah, we basically went back probably 5 or 6 years and looked at what's the total commercial assessment base of the entire city and what's the total commercial assessment base of downtown. And really downtown is, that's where you have your highest assessment values, per square foot. That's the case in every city. And so you want to make sure that the downtown really is, I don't want to call it the cash cow, but it's really where you're drawing a lot of those commercial property taxes that pay for services everywhere. And so one of the things that we've noticed is that the commercial assessment base downtown wasn't really growing for a number of years. It ticked up a little bit this past year. But if you look at it as a percentage of HRM's total assessment base, it's actually shrinking. So I think that's a little bit of a red flag. When you look at other cities across the country, you want your downtown commercial base to be anywhere between, say, 16 and 20% probably, or 25% of your entire city's assessment. And ours isn't there. It's around 13%. And so that's a bit of concern. It just generally means I think there's a lot more activity and development happening outside of the core than in the core. So, this leads back to a bit of a call to say, listen, we need to make some smart investments downtown. Even though there is lots of construction happening, we don't want to see that slow down, because that tax base downtown is what pays for a lot of other services across the entire city. So we have to make sure that assessment base is healthy.
So overall, a positive report, I would say.
I think overall, yeah. Again, especially when you compare with other cities. And one of the things that we're tracking for next year is we're working with an organization, the Canadian Urban Institute, and they're looking at doing something similar to this, but actually tracking a number of different cities. Because it's one thing to know how we're doing ourselves, but really unless we compare and contrast with what those benchmarks look like in other Canadian cities, it's hard to know really how we're standing. So over the next year, we're really working on a bit of a benchmarking. So we'll have even a better sense, not only our own metrics, but how we're doing compared to Quebec City or Toronto or Vancouver or wherever.
Okay, Paul, appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Todd.
All right, take care. Paul MacKinnon, CEO of the Downtown Halifax Business Commission. And good news, obviously, the vibrancy of any downtown core in any municipality is always integral to the overall vibrancy of the entire region, and that's good. And let's hope it continues. Again, lots going on. Tattoo this weekend. There's Music Fest. There's the Comedy Fest coming up, and Fleet Week just wrapped up. So there's lots going on in our city, and of course sporting events with the soccer teams, and the Mooseheads will, before you know, it'll be kicking back into high gear, and the Thunderbirds. So on and on it goes. It's all good, folks, and get downtown and support your community if at all possible. House Calls with Dr. John Gillis when we come back. All right, it's time for House Calls with Dr. John Gillis. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. If you have a health-related question or concern, give us a buzz now. We've got the doctor for an hour, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach out and get some expert advice from Dr. Gillis. Again, 902-405-6000. Dr. Gillis, how was the rugby over the weekend? Pretty good?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah, we had our big tournament on Sunday and had a good win over Ontario. So
nice turnout for it.
It was about 1,000. A little light. Would have liked a few more, but can't win them all.
Yeah,
but, it was a good day. Everyone had fun and enjoyed themselves.
That's good. The Wanderers Ground is the venue in which you were playing. And, of course, there's talk about a stadium, and council was going to discuss it this week, but that got kicked down the road to August, I believe it is, when they'll talk about it or not. Tony Mancini, deputy mayor, is a strong proponent of a permanent stadium there, and you are as well, from what I'm going off memory now, correct?
Yeah, I'm certainly sensitive to common land being used, for as many people as possible. We've had some great events at the Wanderers Grounds, and it's been very creative how it's been handled with, basically a temporary footprint, but it does limit what's doable there. One of the challenges going forward is to have a real conversation about how it's used. And look, I just went through this. We normally in the past, when we would use the stadium, would deal with the Wanderers Soccer Club and have a good relationship with them and would make everything work. But now the city owns the stadium, owns the stuff there, and I had to go through a process with them, to rent and use the stadium. And, that went well. It took a little doing, but it went well. But it, it does come back to, what is the interface between use for professional teams versus amateur nonprofit teams versus others. And again, my experience, this week and these last few weeks was quite positive. But I think it does, come back to a conversation as to, what its use is meant for. Can a high school football team afford to use it, for a big game? Can other events happen there? Or is it only going to be, for the higher end events? And, I think that conversation has started and will continue.
Yeah, I've heard from some people that soccer, the pitch itself, soccer teams don't like to have it disrupted with other sports. Is that true or no?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably true. I would argue, and I have. I mean, rugby has been played on the Wanderers grounds since the 1860s. The soccer that's been played there has been a great community builder. It's great for downtown. It's exciting. People love it. But it is important to find a way to allow other sports and other events to be in there. And again, the soccer club, have been quite collaborative in that. It's just we're trying to figure out what's next. Certainly, having had some experience with this and working with the Save the Oval campaign, there are people out there who want nothing. They think there should be cows, horses, and goat on the commons, and no infrastructure. But I think what we've seen with the Oval in particular, you build something that's usable for everybody, and it's a big positive. So I mean, these are the conversations that are happening. To answer your question, I would favor a permanent stadium on the Wanderers grounds, but with a lens of making it accessible to smaller and more community-based events, in the context of, protecting the grass and, allowing the top stuff, the professional stuff to be played as well. And, I think those conversations will happen.
Okay, fair enough. 902-405-6000, that is the way to reach us for house calls with Dr. Gillis if you have a health-related question or concern. Give us a buzz at 902-405-6000. So, Dr. Gillis, the heat is upon us, lots of humidity, and I thought I'd kind of get your take on, not your take, but some of your advice on precautions that people can take when it comes to heat exhaustion, and what's the difference between heat exhaustion and heat stroke, and who might be most at risk, and kind of cover some of the ins and outs of this topic based on the weather.
Oh, yeah. I mean, heat exhaustion versus the extreme of heat stroke, those are, on a continuum. One is heat stroke is, worse. But, basically people who are, older, have other health conditions are more at risk. People who don't keep themselves hydrated, people who don't have access to air conditioning or fan systems. So it really comes down to, protecting yourself, keeping yourself hydrated, wearing appropriate clothing, wearing appropriate sunblock, and, identifying how much time you can, safely spend in the sun. And it applies to everybody in different ways. We were out running around a rugby field last night, dragging our butts a bit because it was quite humid. But again, regular stops for water, keeping yourself hydrated, keeping yourself cool is important. So people keep that in mind, they'll be all right.
And of course, if people are fit and acclimatized to it, is a difference, because people who live a sedentary life and who aren't necessarily fit, or whatever terminology you want to use, to go out and try and do too much, even mowing the lawn or whatever in humid conditions, can lead to some problems. So I suppose gauge your level of fitness and what you're used to. Just use some common sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I lived in London, Ontario, when we play in the summer, London gets really hot and humid because it's surrounded by lakes. It'd be 40 plus with the humidex every day. You got used to it. You'd load up on water on the way. You'd bring ice towels. You'd have Gatorade and everything. You'd stop every 15 minutes, and we'd go for 2 hours in that heat because we were used to it. Come back here and realize you'd get the odd hot day like that, and you'd be like, why am I dying? But it's because not used to it. So it is what your body is used to as well. So that is important.
Okay, and people at most at risk, obviously, with immunocompromised or perhaps elderly or whomever. Just again, common sense, right?
common sense, and help your friends and family. If somebody's older or a little more vulnerable, and they don't have air conditioning, check on them, make sure they're all right.
Okay, fair enough. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for house calls with Dr. John Gillis. Again, 902-405-6000. Something that caught my eye as well, and we've talked about this quite a bit on the show, but I think it bears repetition because it's a topic that affects and impacts a lot of people, and it's BMI. And the story on the CTV website, the headline, BMI is bad. A new study suggests here's a better way to measure weight. And it talks about BMI as being a challenge, and you've discussed this also. And I think you've agreed that BMI is not perhaps the best measuring stick for weight, correct?
Yeah, I mean, BMI is not it doesn't account for different body types, people who are thicker, more muscular. I mean, according to the BMI, I'm supposed to be 175 pounds or so. I haven't been 175 pounds since I was 14 years old,
right.
And never will be again. So, paying attention to, weight, percent body fat, being strong and fit are important things. But yeah, generally speaking, the BMI is not a great measure.
Okay, what might be some better measures or some better ways to gauge whether you're overweight or need to lose some weight or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, there are some decent charts out there for, based on how tall you are, whether you're male or female, how big you should be, percent body fat, which isn't the easiest thing to measure, but you can get it measured in different ways. Physios can do it. There are different metrics to do it. Those are probably the biggest things. It's not the easiest thing to get your head around, and what is ideal, what is right. We try not to be too judgmental about people, and that it's okay for people to have different body types. But if you're concerned about it, I always recommend starting with looking at fitness and diet, and talking to someone to guide you in those regards. Okay,
Nicholas is giving us a call. Hello, Nick.
Hello, how are you?
Doing well. Go ahead.
Hey, I was in France last week, and I noticed the Coke there has about a third of the carbs as Coke here. And I did some research that has something to do with we use the corn syrup. Can you shed some light onto that?
Yeah, so I didn't hear the last thing you said.
So the corn syrup that's used in Coke is that's different than in Europe. Is there a reason why you think we would not use sugar like they do in Europe?
Could be cost, could be taste, could be regulation, could be a combination of all of those things. But you're right, it is different, and it's different in different places in the world. And a lot of people don't seem to be aware of that. But generally, at the end of the day, drinking too much Coke with piles of sugar in it is not good for you anyway. But, can I tell you why they specifically use that in France and not here? No, I don't think I can tell you that.
I guess what I was trying to get at is the high fructose corn syrup worse for you than sugar in general?
Some people feel that more processed sugars, but I mean, ultimately all sugar is processed from sugarcane. It's just processed in different ways. Ultimately, I don't think there's a whole lot of difference as long as you're balancing how much you're taking in with everything else you're doing in your diet.
Okay. Well, thank you.
They do get processed differently. They get broken down differently. I don't think there's much difference ultimately.
Okay. Thanks again.
Okay, Nick. Take care. 902-405-6000. On that, this story, I wanted to get your take on it. We've talked a bit about it in the past. A new study suggests a unique provincial tax on sugar-sweetened drinks may have dissuaded people from buying and drinking the beverages. The study, sponsored by the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada, examines beverage sales and public before and after the Newfoundland and Labrador so-called sugar tax took effect in September of 2022. You're not from what going off memory here, you're not a strong proponent of a sugar tax. Is that correct, Dr. Gillis?
I just don't necessarily think they work. I mean, if there's new evidence that they do, I mean, they've been tried in various jurisdictions over the years. They cost a lot to administer. People find a way around it. They get sugar in different ways. Would I like people to consume, fewer beverages heavy in corn syrup or sugar? Absolutely. Ultimately, I think some of that comes back to education and food security as well. I mean, accessibility of good food. A lot of people, buy. A lot of people who cannot afford, less processed food or more natural food buy things that are high in salt and sugar because they're processed and they're cheaper. And focusing on those things are important too. So, look, if there's evidence that it can work and it could be nimbly administrated, and it makes some money that goes to education and other things, I'm all for that. But it's a bit of a moving target.
Okay, fair enough. Stick right there. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for House Calls with Dr. John Gillis. We will be back. All right, it's House Calls with Dr. John Gillis. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Cheryl's giving us a call. Hello, Cheryl.
Hi. Dr. Guinness, I'd like to ask you about getting an MRI in Nova Scotia, and what is our wait times, and what is the wait time if you were to choose a private clinic, and the price and whereabouts they are?
So a lot of that depends on what the MRI is, what part of the body, what it's for, how serious it is, all those things. So public MRIs can be anywhere from days to 2 years based on how they're triaged and how serious they are. The private stuff, there are 2 clinics. There's Healthview Imaging, which is on Lacewood Drive in Halifax. They've been around for a long time. And there's a new one I think it's called Why Wait Medical Imaging, which is on Yonge Street in Halifax, which is much newer. And the prices there also depend on what you're getting done, but I think the starting point is around $800 and up, depending on the scan time, depending on whether contrasts or things like that are needed, depending on whether it's multiple body parts. So that's sort of the general lay of the land.
Okay. So can you go from province to province if it's quicker to go from province to province?
You mean privately or publicly?
It probably would be privately.
Yeah, there are private MRI clinics all across the country. It depends where you're located. There's one in Moncton. From my experience, the price points are very similar. If you called Moncton for a knee MRI and they said they could take you tomorrow, and Halifax said it's 4 weeks, might it be worth your while to drive to Moncton? It might be. So on the private side, there's no difference. If it's available and you're willing to pay for it, they'll do it. On the public side, generally speaking, New Brunswick isn't going to want to be MRIing Nova Scotia patients. They want to MRI New Brunswick patients. If there's a reason to, or you're actually living there, our healthcare is transferable, as it should be. But provinces don't particularly like patients from out of province coming in just for a test when they don't live or work there, if that makes sense.
Okay, no, I was just asking. Actually, it was just a question for my mom. She actually lives in Ontario, and she needs an MRI, and their private clinics are booking over a year in advance, and they recommended her to go to the U.S. to have it done in Boston.
Well, yeah, that's another story. Where is she in Ontario?
Southern Ontario.
Not feeling very specific today, are you?
Okay. I'm sorry. It's Brantford, Ontario, Wayne Gretzky country.
Yeah. So I used to work with the rugby team in Toronto, and we didn't have to do it very often. But when we needed something quickly, we'd send people to Buffalo, and over the border. And it's the prices there are typically less than they are in Canada, and they were able to provide pretty quick service. So you may want to get her to look at that. Because,
that's what we looked at. It was $800 American.
Okay.
Yeah, whereas, I mean, Boston, obviously, you could go to Boston, but Buffalo was, drivable.
Yeah, well, I think it was Buffalo. Obviously. We had an option of either or. I just thought maybe it would be easier if I brought her to my house in Nova Scotia.
Well, you certainly can do, right? It's just it depends what you need. Depends whether it's offered here. You can call either of those places here and ask them about it and what they require. They typically they do require a requisition from a doctor, and they'll tell you, what their wait times are, or if they do a specific procedure.
Great, that's perfect. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you very much.
Cheryl, thanks a lot. Take care.
Thanks.
902-405-6000. James, hello.
Hi. I can't resist a quick comment about the Wanderers grounds. My son played football for the late, great St. Patrick's High School 20 years ago, and they played at the Wanderers grounds. Lovely. And I hope that we keep it a really good sports venue. Back to health, Dr. Gillis. Huge, massive development going on to upgrade the Halifax Infirmary /QE2 on Roby. From what you know, from all the improvements that will be made, and it's going to take years, and it disrupts traffic, and it's a huge expense for the government of Nova Scotia, is it worth it?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes, and I've said, and I will always say that successive governments have done their best to try to deal with the monster of healthcare. The reality is, the Victoria General Hospital, is way past its shelf life, but is still in use, and we need new facilities. There's no question about that. At the same time, and, we are seeing this a little bit, as time passes, it's getting better. We need to shift our focus to prevention, to more outpatient care centers like the one that's operating in Bears Lake now. I was in there a few weeks ago myself, and I buggered up my hand. And very efficient, very modern, but, not a colossus of a hospital. Doing more things in smaller peripheral centers, which have lower infrastructure and maintenance costs. We need to look at those things too, and continue to focus on improving primary care access to GPs, nurse practitioners, and other professionals, so people don't need a hospital as much. So it's all part of the picture. I think it's necessary. I think some good work is going on there. It needs to be done. The traffic part is definitely frustrating, especially if you live in Central Halifax, but it's important work, and I know they're doing their best. Okay,
a balanced response. Thank you. Yeah, and I guess we'll just see what happens. But on the other hand, yeah, I guess it's short-term pain, long-term gain, and I just hope we need all the new curative stuff. You've mentioned the preventive. And so it's a combination, and I hope we get the balance right.
Okay, thanks, James. Appreciate the call.
Absolutely correct.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for house calls with Dr. John Gillis. Again, 902-405-6000. House calls continues when we come back. All right, House Calls with Dr. John Gillis continues. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. If you have a health-related question or concern, give us a buzz at 902-405-6000. We've got the doctor for another half hour. We've got some room for you as well. Again, 902-405-6000. Mike's giving us a call. Hello, Mike.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Great. So I wanted to jump on and talk about the MRI. I got triaged back in October, and I found out about the cancellation list. I called last Wednesday and get in on Thursday at 5 o'clock for my MRI. So for that lady that just called, if she's looking to get an MRI done, definitely get on the cancellation list. It's a lot quicker, and I was at the point I was looking to maybe spend the money at a private clinic also, but cancellation, it worked.
Okay, is that so? Do you have a question for Dr. Gillis, or do you just wanted to pass that information
No,
along?
I just want to pass that information off to your listeners and to the doctor's patients. If you're out there waiting for an MRI, get on the cancellation list. It's very quick.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks for the info.
Thank you.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for house calls with Dr. Gillis. Again, 902-405-6000. Good advice, I suppose, Dr. Gillis? When all is said and done, that's sage advice.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a couple issues there. I mean, saw one this morning of a patient of mine who didn't show up for an MRI, and I need to figure out what happened there. It's not good when people don't show up. Sometimes it's for legitimate reasons. They're sick. We always hope that they'll notify the hospital when it's happened so they can fill the slot. Because if, the cancellation is contingent on just what it says, someone actually canceling. So if I've got a procedure tomorrow and I'm sick or, depressed about the Leafs or whatever and I can't go, I need to let them know so they can then fill that slot. Now, I don't think it's quite as easy. I'm very happy the caller was able to get in, and that does happen sometimes. And some of it still depends on, on the triage level. I mean, if it's somebody that's, the next triage level, they'll try to fit them in. If it's an elective thing that's been triaged at 2 years, but you never know. And it's a fair point. And, the old squeaky wheel gets the grease thing. So it is definitely worth checking on that.
Yeah, absolutely. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. I saw this story on the CBC website. I thought I'd read a bit of it and get your take. As Dr. Theresa Tam retires as Canada's top doctor, she's calling for a national vaccine registry. Tam says the COVID-19 pandemic, which began early in 2020, of course, which killed 60,000 Canadians, showed how badly one is needed to track vaccines and protect vulnerable communities. A national vaccine registry, she says, could prevent and manage crisis like the resurgence of measles that the country now faces, that you and I have talked about on a weekly basis, seemingly. But when it comes to letting our guard down and how quickly we forget, it seems to me, Dr. Gillis, that vigilance, everybody was vigilant and everybody was willing to do whatever it took during the pandemic. But we seem to have short memories as a society. What are your thoughts on this?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, it's frustrating to watch, measles come back when, there's just no need for it. I mean, and this is not some new funky vaccine that was developed at the last minute in a very urgent situation. These are vaccines that have been around for 30 plus years and have kept us safe. And here we are. We're seeing cases of measles again.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, 902-405-6000. And Dr. Tam, I mean, any parting words for Dr. Tam? She did good work. I'm assuming you would agree with that?
Well, look, anyone who took us through the storm deserves huge kudos. I mean, Dr. Tam, Dr. Strang, Premier McNeil, Prime Minister Trudeau gets a lot of grief, but he led the way. Minister Anand, who did a lot of the procurement. There's a lot of people who deserve credit for taking us through a very, very tough time, and I hope that isn't forgotten. So, I mean, congratulations to Dr. Tam, and congratulations on the next chapter.
Okay, fair enough. 902-405-6000. Give us a buzz, folks. We've got some open lines for you if you'd like to get in a question. 902-405-6000. Here's an email question from Dennis. And you'll have to forgive me because I'm going to have to spell out a couple of these words here. I don't know how to pronounce it. He says, I'm left-handed. In the last year, I've had surgery for, this is DUPRUYTRENS. I don't know how to pronounce that. On my left hand, and had a left hip replacement. I have left eye cataracts and something else in his left ear. Is this common for one side versus the other is the question.
Sorry, I didn't follow that at all.
Okay, I'll read it. He had surgery for Dupuytren's or DUPR.
Yeah.
Okay, on his left hand, and had a left hip replacement, and said he's had left eye cataract as well, and had an issue with his left ear. Asking, is this common for one side versus the other?
Not that I can think of. I can't think of a reason. I think that's pretty random.
Fair enough. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. This I wanted to get your take on as well. This off the CTV website. The human body needs protein. Proteins carry out countless functions inside cells, and they are vital for the growth, repair, and maintenance of muscles, bones, and skin. And with food companies rolling out high-protein versions of huge range of foods, including milkshakes and granola bars and even pancakes and popcorn, you might be tempted to think you need to add more to your diet. But nutritionists say if you are getting enough food, you probably are getting enough protein. So what's your take on this? We've talked a lot about vitamins and supplements and people getting spending in some cases way too much money for these types of things. But what's your take on when people should take added protein or I guess a balanced diet fixes all, does it?
Yeah, generally speaking, most people, unless they have, bowel, stomach, or absorption issues, if they eat a balanced diet of, carbs, protein, fat, fruits, vegetables, will get what they need. There are people that can't eat certain things and do need supplements. They need more protein or they need, different things added. This is where marketing meets reality, I guess is what I would say. And, it is finding that balance. But I think that's an accurate statement. Most people, if they can afford and access decent balanced food, will not need any or much supplementation. But again, we already mentioned that is that, if you're not aware of what you're eating a lot of salt and processed foods and not getting the balance, there's a bit of a conundrum there because then you're spending extra money for supplements, whereas if you spent that money on proper food or better food, you might not need the supplements. So again, marketing meeting reality.
How much quality control do you think goes into? I know it's a bit random, but it goes into supplements. I often wonder when you buy a supplement, whether it's vitamins or whatever, how we know that they'd be mass manufactured. How much quality control goes into this? And what are your thoughts on that? Can we trust, I guess, what we're buying?
It's hard to say. I mean, what I usually tell people is, try and find out where something's manufactured, read about the company. If it's, generally if it's manufactured in Canada or the U.S., it may be safer than but you just don't know. It's hard to make a generalization. So read about the companies. This is not the standards applied to pharmaceutical grade stuff is far higher than that applied to supplements. Generally, it doesn't cause a problem, but it can.
Okay, back to the protein question. It can be found in not just steak or meat or whatever. It can be found in a large range of food, including plant-based sources of protein as well, like beans and lentils. So any advice when it comes to protein and where it can be found, just to make sure that people are getting the protein that they need?
Yeah, the easiest thing to do is literally hop online, go into Google, and there's multiple sources of protein. Obviously, different meats have lots of protein, peanut butter, but there are, you mentioned beans and lentils, eggs. There's lots of sources. It's just trying to find what suits your diet and what people like to eat.
Yeah, for sure. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for house calls with Dr. John Gillis. We've got the doctor for another 15 minutes or so. Give us a buzz, 902-405-6000. House calls continues when we come back. All right, it's House Calls with Dr. Gillis. We got the good doctor to the top of the hour. Got some room for you as well if you'd like to get a call in. We got some open lines for you. Again, 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. I was going to ask you when I kick things off, but I slipped my mind. Dr. Gillis, how are things been at the Dartmouth ER? Pretty busy still, or same old, I suppose, eh?
Yeah, no, it's... I was in there yesterday. It was, 30 to be seen all day long. Just the way it seems to be right now.
Yeah, for sure. And injuries, illnesses, or all of the above, I suppose, eh?
Mixed bag this time of year. Illnesses, pain, mood issues, everything. Just, it's very busy. We never got below 30 to be seen in the time I was there.
Well, that's got to be stressful on everybody working there, I suppose, eh?
Yeah, I mean, like I said this before, it adds up. People come and go for different reasons. We have lost a lot of, particularly more senior nurses. The younger nurses who have come in are fantastic, and as they spend more time there, they really get up to speed quickly. But losing experience, isn't helpful, and at some point the experienced docs get fed up as well, and they move on to other quieter things. So I hope we continue to make progress on better primary care, so the wait times and backlog get better.
Fair enough. 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Give us a buzz if you'd like to get in a question to Dr. Gillis. This story on The Guardian, but it was reported throughout this country as well. Cannabis use. Cannabis use may double the risk of dying from heart disease and increase the risk of stroke by 20%, according to a global review of data. The number of people using cannabis and cannabinoids has soared over the past decade, while previous studies have linked cannabis to cardiovascular problems. The scale of the risk has until now been unclear. The story goes on to say this is an important gap in light of major changes in consumption, researchers in France have said. So, Dr. Gillis, do you have anything to add to this, or any insight on this, or what are your thoughts in general on this?
No, I mean, I haven't seen this. I pulled it up now. I mean, this is important data. I mean, we need data points to determine what adds risk to us, how much is risky. Is it risky for the person who has a little puff once a month, or is it risky for the person who's doing it every day? And I'm assuming those details are embedded in this study. But it is important to understand the risk of everything. And I think one of the things we've always said is, cannabis can be very helpful, for some medical conditions. It may be more benign than alcohol for recreational use, but it is not without risk, because it can cause mental health issues in some cases. But, this is important data. I'm actually curious to have a good look at it myself, because it'll help inform, once again, how we advise people on the best way to do things.
Yeah, anecdotally, do you feel as though that since legalization, more people are using cannabis, or is there empirical evidence which would back that up?
I'm sure there is, and I think yes. I think it's much more socially acceptable. Although you'd be surprised, over the years, people that you wouldn't think that maybe they grew up in the '60s or whatever, that it was probably a little more common than most people thought. It's easier when you can just go to the store and buy it, and perhaps more importantly, have a better understanding of knowing exactly what you're taking. I mean, I often joke about this. People would just smoke what was in front of them, but they wouldn't drink a glass full of overproof rum as opposed to a glass of Coors Light. They'd want to know what it was, but yet they would do it with cannabis, not knowing what strain it was, what strength it was, anything like that. So education, I think, has been a big part of this, and we continue to educate ourselves. And again, that study is interesting. As we've seen people use more cannabis, what is the relative risk, and how much is too much, and that's an important conversation to have.
Yeah, and there's been conversation about the developing mind. I've heard that for teenagers, there's concern that young people might be over consuming. Certainly legally, the legal age they wouldn't be permitted to, but we know that's not the case. But is there anything to the developing mind and cannabis use, in your opinion?
No, absolutely. There is decent data out there that before 25 and especially before 21, that it can affect cognitive development. And again, I'll write it back to how much. Is the odd bit going to cause a huge problem? Probably not, but it's still something that should be used responsibly by people ideally older than 21. But we know that that's not the case. I mean, it comes back to prohibition arguments. It's not too hard to find that sort of thing at anywhere really. So it comes back to education, helping people understand responsible use, what the risks are, what the downside can be. And, that continues to be a work in progress.
I've heard that often that cannabis isn't physically addictive to the body, but it might be addictive when it comes to in other ways, I suppose. Is cannabis addictive? Could we say that or that's the case or not, or is that simply an oversimplification of it?
It's a bit of an oversimplification. The body doesn't become dependent on it in the sense that of withdrawal to the degree that opiates do, but people can develop what we call a cannabis use disorder, whereby they become, emotionally dependent on it at least, and sort of require it to function. Is that more physiologic than psychologic? More psychologic than physical? Yes. Although there are people who the physical side of it is it helps their pain, it helps their mood. They need it to feel whatever normal means to them. So again, it's important to understand that, physical dependence, getting withdrawal is less common than with opiates, but it can happen if you're dependent on it and you've used a lot of it for a long time.
Okay, Dr. Gillis, always great. Appreciate it very much. Thanks for doing it.
Have a wonderful day.
All right, take care. That's Dr. John Gillis. That's House Calls. We do that each and every Wednesday from 11 until 12. Now we've got some time for you, obviously. Our open hour. By the way, this story we'll be talking about, we will preempt the open hour for a few minutes to talk to the Deputy Mayor, Tony Mancini, HRM Deputy Mayor, to discuss the fact that Halifax Regional Council passed a series of motions at its meeting last night to have the city staff study bike lanes in the municipality. The staff will now conduct a study of proposed bike lanes for the fiscal years 2026 through 2029, including cost estimates. The report will also look at alternative network solutions that could lower costs, which are now estimated to stretch to into the $90 million range. And this was a motion that was tabled by Tony Mancini, who will join us at about 12:10, 12:15 for a few moments. Again, we ideally don't take guests during the call-in segment, but I thought that it's important that we get the take from Tony Mancini, and that was his affordability today, so we have accommodated him to do so. But certainly we will offer and welcome you the opportunity to weigh in on this as well. What's your take on this? Do you think that council got this right? A lot of hand-wringing over bike lanes in the city, and a lot of people concerned about the cost, and rightfully so when you look at anything that balloons from $20 million to pushing $100 million, especially when 60% of the network is completed for $16 million. So the remaining 40% is going to cost $80 million. Tony Mancini said that concerns him, and it concerns me as well. And it's concerned a lot of you also who called the show and offered your concern. And again, I think that's justified. Also in the news cycle today, this from Nova Scotia Power, again, something that a lot of you talked about for a solid week or more on this one when the cyber leak broke, news of the cyber leak. Nova Scotia Power is expanding its response to the recent ransomware attack that exposed personal information of both current and former customers in a post to their site. The utility says starting today, all customers, past and present, are eligible for 5 years for free credit monitoring, even if they didn't receive a notification letter. So I think that is an important development and something that many of you were calling for, and I was calling for as well. So what's your take on that or anything else you've got in your mind? The way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. An open hour when we come back. All right, taking your calls. So it reaches 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Look, folks, I get it that for some of you out there, it's like bike lanes, really, again. But look, it's back in the news cycle because the deputy mayor, its motion passed last night to have city staff study bike lanes in this municipality. It'll now conduct a study of proposed bike lanes for the fiscal years 2026 through 2029. Including cost estimates. Now, why this is important, in my opinion, is because, and I think that Tony Mancini's expressed himself well, and he'll join me, by the way, in a little bit, just quickly to get his take on this. Again, the only time that he was able to join us to talk about this. He said yesterday, we were able to build 60% of the network with $16 million, To complete the remaining 40%, we're close to $80 million to do that, so that concerns me. And look, I think that's completely legitimate. When you're talking about that kind of eye-popping cost overrun, for council to not have a look at this and to ask staff to study this and to perhaps sharpen their pencil and look at alternatives and look at alternative funding models as well, I think would be irresponsible. I just do. And look, folks, did council get this right? Finally, did they get this right? We know that Mayor Andy Fillmore proposed or tabled a motion recently in which was something to this effect, but it was calling for an immediate pause on construction and also kind of conflated the issues of cost with congestion and potentially does congestion create or do bike lanes add to congestion? So what's your take on this, folks? Did council get this right last night? And do you think that it's high time that they did so? And does this damage the future of bike lanes and active transportation in Halifax? For those of you out there listening who may or may not support bike lanes or active transportation, what are your thoughts on this? 902-405-6000. That's what reaches out. Vanessa, do we have is Tony Mancini on the line there now? Oh, I thought it was written down there, Tony Mancini. Anyway, okay, 902-405-6000. Give us a call. Also in the news cycle today, Nova Scotia Power is expanding its response to the recent ransomware attack that exposed personal information of both current and former customers. In a post to their site, the utility said starting today, all customers past and present are eligible for 5 years of free credit monitoring, even if they didn't receive a notification letter. The utility also said that the personal information of former customers was also accessed on or around March 19, 2025, later taken by an unauthorized third party, in addition to the personal information of the current customers whom notifications have already been sent. So, look, folks, this is a positive step. I think it's too bad that it took all kinds of public pressure, immense public pressure to do so. But I think that it only makes sense because after the 2 years is up, as a lot of you have said, then what? So 5 years are for credit protection monitoring. Have you signed up for it? Will you sign up for it? Do you feel better about this? Do you feel more at ease with this? What are your thoughts on this or anything else you got in your mind? Again, 902-405-6000. Tim's giving us a call. Hello, Tim.
Hi, Todd. How are you?
I'm well. You?
Oh, not too bad. I called to complain about the bike lanes and a little bit of Nova Scotia Power. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that they're still trying to force this down our throats. There's been enough pushback about these bike lanes, and then to find out the price, like you said, ballooned to an egregious amount, like it's absolutely disgusting, and they weren't going to take a look at it. They've been caught or said they're intentionally trying to slow things down. Yes, bike lanes congest traffic. Go down Hollis Street, prime example. I'll leave it at that, but interesting fact, I've got an energy monitoring system in my house called Wise Energy.
Yeah.
And I found out for the billing process of January 24th, I think it's 24th of March, Nova Scotia Power billed me for just over 700 kilowatts that I didn't use.
Wow.
And I'm able to do the math. I can see day-to-day consumption. This tells me if it's my hot water heater that's using it or whatever it is. And I think it was like $130, and that's only the one-time period. But I know a lot of people have been Nova Scotia Power is particularly difficult to deal with, and there's definitely something funny going on. I'm going to be going back and checking other billing cycles. It takes a little bit of time, but all the numbers are there. I got this because I have solar panels, and the numbers didn't seem to be adding up for me. Anyways, that's all I got to say today. Take care. Have a good day.
Tim, do you have a smart meter? Sorry if you already mentioned that. I didn't catch it.
Yes, I do. To get solar panels, they request that you get a smart meter.
Okay. And do you have concerns that potentially that might be at play, or what are your? Because we've heard anecdotally from a lot of people who have called into question their billing after getting a smart meter put in. Some people's bills have doubled year over year, month over month.
Yep. Well, I suggest to anybody, I think it was Advanced Electric. They came in, they installed the system for me. I think it was about $600, somewhere in around that neighborhood. They hook up two things to your the cables, the negative and positive, like the top of your panel, that come in and out, or and then it monitors exactly what you're using at point of use, not what the power company is estimating you're using. And to answer your question, I put off getting the smart meter as long as I could because I've heard all the bad things about them. I had to get one because of the solar panels, is what I was told.
Yeah. So with that information, Tim, what do you do with it? Do you contest your bill, or what's the good of the information, I guess?
Well, I reached out to them on the 11th of June. They said they would be back in touch with me, and I've yet to hear from anybody. I've done a little more research myself, and I'm talking to the DRO. I Googled the utility review board and started looking for who to contact on that side of things. And I'm also considering seeing what the appetite is for a class action lawsuit, because it's obvious, like it's blatant, blatant to me that there's something wrong there and they're benefiting from it or profiting from it. So they're refusing to address the issue.
Okay. Interesting, Tim. Good luck. Thanks for the call, pal.
Take care.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Ross, hello.
Hey, Todd. How are you? I know you're well. So am I.
Good.
I won't ask you. Anyways, I'll continue on from Nova Scotia Power just before I get to bike lanes. Yeah, it's frustrating because, they're going to force this 5-year credit monitoring thing on us, and I guess it's optional, but the funny part is, it's like, what are the chances that this will eventually get billed down the road to, I don't know, maybe the customer?
Well, I think that's 100% that eventually it'll work its way. Yeah,
they're already probably planning their next proposal to up the rates. Anyways, I'll move on from that. That'll drive me crazy. Anyways, bike lanes. So yeah, I'm actually about to leave my house to go bike to work, and someone who commutes to work not regularly, but as much as I can during the months that kind of permit it. It's kind of frustrating to see though that because you go to any big cities where they do have, I guess, effective bike lanes, they push one artery, one way that, or not just one way, but, multiple ways that are kind of like the most sensible way, the least amount of grade, where it's like, least resistance for a cyclist to take. Mm-hmm. And, just for example of if you go down to the South End, where on formerly Cornwallis Park there, they have a bike lane around that entire kind of like island of where that playground is. And, if you just look at the sets, they removed all the parking. There's down to just one lane each way, and bike lanes, which are basically, those ones are almost never used. It's because you can bike through the park. You know what I mean? Like, there's a triangle to go through the park. Yeah. Why would you go around?
Yeah, sure.
Weird. So, and the commons as well. There's bike lanes all around the commons, which, I guess you got to put them to kind of encourage it. But when Andy Fillmore kind of proposed that, at least some common sense snapped in, where I was like, okay, is he actually going to modify this? Because, if, like you said, if it balloons and if it's way more than they envisioned, mm-hmm. maybe it isn't the best thing, because maybe we're not all going to be in electric cars like they said, like they thought they were going to be in by 2030. So, I hope that some common sense prevails in the way that it's like, hey, you can have bike lanes and motor vehicles on the same roads.
Yeah.
It has to be. They just can't do every single road, which just seems to be their plan. They're just putting them wherever they can. Like, I use Agricola as an example because, I figured they would have done it by now mm-hmm. had there not been so many businesses that are on Agricola, where if they do put bike lanes, they're going to have to remove street parking. And do you think any of the business will like that? I doubt it. So, I bet they would have done Agricola if they didn't have all the business there. But that's an example of, it's like they're actually thinking about this. They're not putting them just everywhere. But, if anyone that's actually listening on this to the call line, or maybe this is our therapy line where we rant to you and hopefully, we feel better about it. Anyways, yeah, I just, I hope that some common sense prevails, that they're actually looking at it, it is a step in the right direction. They're not just, doubling down again and again, because the money's obviously not transferring to more cyclists on the road. In fact, we probably have more of those e-scooters on the road, which are still kind of, Wild West as far as the rules go. So,
mm-hmm.
Anyways, I'll end my rant there. But
okay, Ross. All right, take care, pal. All right, take care. 902-405-6000. And to his point, right, is that I think this makes sense to have another look at this alternative network solutions. Why not, right? My only concern is, or not my only concern, one of my concerns is that staff is going to conduct the study. And is this the same staff that came up with this plan in the first place? And I get it that contracting things like this out to other people is third party is not it's expensive, but I'm just not sure that this current iteration of staff is qualified. Shouldn't say qualified. I don't know that they're going to come up with anything new, but perhaps they will. We shall see. Anyway, 902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us. I think part of the whole conversation are contractors and the tendering process. To me, that is at the nub of all of this, is what is the tendering process and how many contractors are bidding on this, and are we being gouged as a municipality? 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Got open lines for your folks. Give us a buzz, 902-405-6000. Hello, Ben.
Hey, Todd. How you doing?
Doing well.
First-time caller. Just jumped in my truck a few minutes ago and caught the tail end of the caller that was talking about the Nova Scotia Power, the solar panels, and the smart meters.
Yeah.
And I'm going through the same thing. There's something going on there that they haven't told us about. They've been talking about the cyber incident and the social insurance numbers, but when I got my second last bill, it was the highest bill I'd ever received in the 10 years I've been in my house, and I kind of puzzled over a bit, paid it. Anyway, I got my bill yesterday, finally, about 6 weeks later than I should have, and it was my second highest bill ever, and there was no credit on my bill for any of my solar power production for the last 2 months. I've tried to call them. Of course, you get on their system there and it's busy, and I just timed out. I don't have all day to sit there on hold in front of a phone, so I've yet to get a hold of them. But there's definitely something going on there that's affected more than just a bunch of social insurance numbers.
So you think their billing system might be affected or impacted in some way? I guess what you're saying, Ben, is that you find it hard to believe that it's a coincidence that this thing happened and then suddenly your bills are out of whack. Is that what you're saying?
Well, exactly. But the first thing that kind of grabbed my attention is, okay, I have accounts that we're not sending out bills electronically to people who have the online accounts. Well, if you're Nova Scotia Power and you're missing out on all that revenue, why wouldn't you have immediately gone back to mailing out the bills? Like, the bill I got yesterday is like 5-6 weeks old. Like, they're missing out all on that revenue. Why wouldn't they have just mailed? They've slowly been catching up. I have some related business accounts, and those finally started coming through the last week or two, but they're way behind. I don't know why they wouldn't have gone back to mailing out bills. I don't know why bills are late, and now none of my solar production has been deducted from my bill. And now I got to call them and try and fight my way through that with them, and hopefully they have records of my power production and it comes off my next bill.
I can see why that'd be very frustrating for you. So your solar production, generally you get rebates for that in the past? You have?
Yeah, like it, obviously during the summer it reduces my power bill to almost nothing. In the winter, production is down and energy consumption is up, but there's always some. But there was $0 credit on this last bill, and it would have been for the months of April and May, so we're already starting to get longer daylight and stuff like that. So the credit on my bill should have been in the hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
Wow.
And it was $0. There was no mention of it when you compared the line items to the previous month's bill. Like, those line items completely disappeared off the billing. So my bills did not include any credit for the solar production.
Wow, that's very interesting. And yeah, well, and frustrating because, like you said, you can't wait on hold forever, and the customer service is less than ideal.
Yeah, so I got the power bill beside my computer at work, and I'm going to try and get logged on maybe here this afternoon and just try to outweight them. But if there's a whole bunch of other people like me in the same situation, they're probably inundated with calls as well, right?
Sure,
so,
they are.
I don't think they've been straight with people at all. So I'm not really interested in being part of a class action lawsuit. I just want my credit and want them to be honest with us.
Okay, Ben, appreciate it. Thanks for the call, pal.
Thanks, Todd.
Take care. 902-405-6000. All right. As mentioned, Tony Mancini joins us, Deputy Mayor, District 6 here in HRM. Tony, thanks for joining the show. We know you're busy.
And my apologies for the delay in connecting with you, Todd.
That's okay. No sweat. I know you're busy. Like you said, it's a fluid situation. So council passed your motion last night, and that's a good thing, obviously, right?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay. What do you think, based on the dialogue around the table, what were some of the deciding factors?
Well, my motion is totally different from the mayor's motion. Right? The mayor's motion, he led with bike lanes cause congestion, which caused a lot of divide in our community. In fact, even some divide in council. And I know many of your listeners, or a lot of the folks that call in your show, not a big fan of the bike lanes, and definitely not a big fan of congestion. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, the bike lane may cause some of the congestion, but the majority of the congestion by far is just the volume of cars. And we've added, 20,000 people each year for the last number of years. There's more people and there's more cars. So congestion still needs to be addressed. My motion is about the cost overrun, and I'm supportive of a connected bike network. But we've spent, we've gotten 60% of our network completed, and that was by $16 million. And $6 million by HRM taxpayers and $10 million by provincial and federal money. So we were able to complete 60% of the network with $16 million. Now we're close to $80 million to complete the 40%. So my motion was about, let's take a look at these bike lanes. Not this year, the 2025, they're already underway. Starting with next year, let's look at those bike lanes. Let's look at the projects. Is there another creative way we can still connect the network but reduce the cost? We need to be creative. Is there the ability to reach out to other orders of government, other sources to help with the offsetting the cost? Todd, we did the same thing with Windsor Street Exchange. It was the costs were going through the roof, so we went back and pushed staff on it and said, come up with some different designs so we have the right elements and address the costs. I brought a motion forward for the Halifax Forum. I mean, the Halifax Forum is $110 million. Look, on council, Henry and I are the biggest hockey fan, no question. I love hockey, but $110 million to place the forum doesn't make sense. So I brought a motion forward to do the same thing. Come back with a different design. Let's look at that. Let's reduce the pricing. So I think it was the right thing to do with the bike lanes. And I know some folks, some of your callers respectfully would just like us to see is to kill the bike infrastructure, stop it, pause it. I'm not looking to pause it. We need to connect it. However, we need to be responsible with the taxpaying dollars at the same time. So just take a look at how we can do this.
All right. So if staff comes back with a report which does not satisfy you, might a pause at some point be because staff could return and say, look, we've crunched the numbers and they're what they're and the costs are what the costs are. So what then?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, to be honest. I really think that they're going to come back and say, okay, this AAA network is it's a certain standard. So, and some of the biking folks will not be happy with this, but, maybe we don't do the AAA network in some parts of it. Can we, be creative and find a solution that's less expensive? And I think staff know that, and they have that ability to do so. That'll be the real debate, because if it's a changing of a standard of the network, there will be opposition to that. I think we need to do our due diligence. We're talking about a significant amount of money. There's great benefit, and some would argue, but there's great benefit of having a connected biking network, in my opinion. However, it's not at any cost.
Okay, Tony, thanks for doing this. Appreciate it. I know you're busy. We'll talk soon.
My pleasure. Thanks for reaching out. Cheers.
All right. Take care. That's Tony Mancini, Deputy Mayor here in HRM, and represents the District of 6. All right, folks, we'll continue with your calls. What is on your mind today? Perhaps you might want to react to what you heard from Tony Mancini or other callers or whatever else you've got in your mind. 902-405-6000. The open hour continues when we come back. All right, continuing to take your calls. So it reaches is 902-405-6000 and 902-405-6000. Cindy's giving us a call. Hello, Cindy.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for taking my call, Todd.
Sure. Thank you for calling.
Just quickly, I think regarding the bike lanes, part of the issue is looking at the big picture, because we hear the argument from council that it's all about reducing the congestion and reducing traffic on the roads. Has there been any analysis done to say where are the people coming from? Where are the big concentration of employers? I live in Cole Harbour. I work on the south end of Halifax. I've been commuting from the Cole Harbour to the south end for 30-plus years. I'm not going to ride a bike to work. We have people coming in from Hammond's Plains. We have people coming in from Eastern Passage. We have people coming in from Chesapeake. These rural communities are expanding. They are not the people that are going to be riding bikes to work. You have parents who are taking kids to daycare. You have people who are professionals who are carrying laptops, presentation materials. These are not the people that are going to be riding bikes to work. So stepping back, looking at the big picture, was that any of that analysis undertaking? I'm not against bike lanes in an environment where they work. And having bike lanes are fine, but don't do it at the expense that they're going to encroach on the roadways for people that have no other choice or no other means to get to work but in their vehicle. Another point to make is people who work shift work. I have colleagues or friends who are nurses. They work a 12-hour shift. They're not going to get off a 12-hour shift and ride a bike home where they may live in Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage, some of those communities that I've mentioned. Mm-hmm. So the big picture here, have we looked at that? Where, as I said, repeating myself, where are the employers? What's the concentration? How many people work in these large employers, the universities, the hospitals, the provincial government, the federal government, and where are they commuting from?
Yeah, and this is all part of asking staff to revisit this. And I don't know why staff would not have addressed those questions in the first place. You would think if you're going to spend that kind of money and create this type of network that you would look at those questions that you're addressing, and they would be able to support that. But I would bet that there's not been any in-depth analysis of any of the things that you're talking about.
Perfect. Yes, I totally agree, and it frustrates me because I hear this, I listen to your show when I can, and I'm just step back here. What is the big picture? Who are the people that we're trying to serve here? It's ballooned to $90+ million.
Yep.
We're still not going to get people off the road because they have to find. Andy Fillmore was bang on. We have to take a pause and look at are there other alternative measures that we can take a look at to get people off the roads. It's not going to be a bike.
Okay, Cindy, appreciate the call. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Bye-bye. 902-405-6000. Hello, Gloria.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, you?
I'm great. I watched that whole circus last night.
I bet you did.
Every single minute of it.
Yeah.
And let me tell you something, Todd. You don't have to be an Einstein to know why that motion came forward. That motion came forward because of the heat that they received from all the residents because they didn't support the mayor. Mm-hmm. That's why it came forward. The only difference in that motion and the mayor's motion, he said, halt it until we look at everything. Let's get a report. Let's look at everything. And about the money. Mancini, Godfather Mancini, I call him. He's the godfather of the council now. He came forward. I'm concerned about the money. The mayor didn't talk about the money. The mayor did talk about the money.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
That was one of his main concerns. And then they went round and round and round. And Becky Kent said the mayor's motion wasn't clear. We couldn't understand it. And then Austin talked about there can be an overrun on streets. We can go way over. We can take the bridge fare off and nobody complains. But a lot of them out there have car brains. You know, that's all they think about is cars. And then a real bright light came on when Harding suggested that the real problem with bikes and the reason people are complaining is that council did not communicate to the residents the benefits of cycling. Wow. Can you believe it?
Yeah. Wow.
That was the real thing, and it was just pathetic listening to them. They're going to listen. Let me tell you something, Todd.
Okay.
They're going to complete those bike lanes no matter what the cost.
Yeah.
That was very clear listening to them last night. And when Brad Anguish, the commissioner, came on and told them the bulk of the bike lanes left are the real expensive ones. They're the ones that are really going to cost the money. That's why the mayor wanted to look at where these are going and why they're going that way. But it was interesting. It was really interesting. They're never going to support what the mayor said, so they changed it around. And the Godfather's the big hero because he brought the motion forward because he was forced to bring the motion forward. And I listened to every word of it, and then the other awful decision they made on the construction depot thing, they turned that down. Last time they did that, it was appealed, and they lost, and they'll lose again this time. But I listened to it all, Todd. It was hard to listen to.
Well, the other thing as well is that they're asking staff to conduct a study, and staff created this plan in the first place, right?
Well, the residents have conducted the study.
Yeah, there you go.
They've already conducted it. They've told them about the congestion. They've told them about people losing parking spaces and handicap parking and businesses. They've done it. They've done the study. But they don't want to listen to the residents. The sad part was, Todd, after I listened to all of it, I went to bed, I went to sleep, I had a nightmare, and I dreamed I was over there with them.
Okay.
So anyway, have a great
all right,
day.
thanks for the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. Mike, hello.
How you doing today, buddy?
Doing well, you?
Oh, I'm doing okay. Yeah, this whole bike lane stuff, this has been an agenda for these guys for years now, and they won't let it go. I wish they'd just do a plebiscite and put an end to this, because I'm out in the car right now, and I'm hitting potholes left, right, and center, dodging big. The roads are an absolute mess, and it's insane that they're not even taking care of that. I hardly even see a work crew out over at Giant Tiger in Dartmouth. They're paving the parking lot, but I wish they put some of that asphalt on the roads. Anyway, yeah, these guys, they got an agenda, the whole friggin' bunch of them. You remember our conversation on Waverly Road with what's-his-name? Sean Cleary.
Yeah.
And so these guys are gung-ho to go for it for a very small percentage of the population. They want to spend all this money. We need our roads done. Just quickly, Todd, on the Nova Scotia Power.
Yeah.
I'm in an apartment building. I'm on the third floor. The heat rises up, like even in the wintertime. My roommate and I, we hardly ever put the heat on. We're a couple of big guys. It's only on the most of cold days. Anyway, around December, when I have a credit on my account, well, all of a sudden I got a big bill, and that all disappeared. So now, about 2 months ago, I got another great big bill, and we don't have the heat on at all. And they give you this breakdown of which appliances and stuff are using up. I think my water heater ate up like $100 and some odd for a water heater for hot water. Like, it's just, I don't know what's, like I heard some of the other callers, I don't know what's going on with these guys, but I know people are getting ripped off. And like one of the other callers, or two of the other callers said, you can't even get a hold of these guys at Nova Scotia Power. They're not accountable to us at all. It's like exactly the same as dealing with these clowns at the city council. Like, how many people call you? There goes one of our wiser drivers.
Yeah, I heard that.
How many people call you daily and, say, look, this bike lane thing is insane. I can't imagine, Todd. Many years ago, I used to deliver freight and stuff right downtown Halifax and that. I don't know what those boys are doing today for parking because those roads are so narrow now with them silly bike lanes. Anyway, buddy, thanks for the time.
Okay, pal. Take care. 902-405-6000. Stephen, hello.
Hello, Todd. Happy 2 days to Friday.
Indeed.
Indeed. You had a caller on, I think it was yesterday, who was talking about Metza.
Yeah.
Just wanted to set the record straight. So the family that opened it up has been in Canada for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
They have 24 restaurants, and they're planning on opening up another dozen in Calgary area. And they did get a loan from a COA for $500,000 to build a food distribution facility, but it's a loan. It's not a gift. So I think I just wanted to kind of set the record straight because I don't like disinformation when people are saying, oh, they only have 5 restaurants and they got $500,000 from the government and they're immigrants. Well, they were immigrants 30 years ago or more.
Mm-hmm.
But the next generation of the family are Canadians. They're not immigrants. Like the 2 sons that own it now they're just like me and you. They're Canadians.
Mm.
So I just wanted to kind of set that record straight in saying that before you spout off about something, you probably should get your facts a little straight before you kind of get out there. Because to me, it just seemed really not great. I won't use any other terms other than that. And Vanessa cautioned me. She said, "Don't use that term." So that's I don't know. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, I agree that information is obviously a key component to any conversation, and I appreciate you calling to straighten the record out, Stephen. Thank you.
No problem. It's up on their websites.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks for the call.
You can go read it. Yeah.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. Give us a call, folks. What's on your mind today? Again, 902-405-6000. We'll get some open lines for you. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, we got some time to the top of the hour. Get some room for you as well. If you'd like to get in a call, give us a buzz at 902-405-6000. 902-405-6000. Some emails while we await another few calls. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Jonathan says this via email says, as the previous caller stated, City Council will push forward with the bike lane agenda. In my opinion, Council wants Halifax to be like Amsterdam with a strong bike culture, which will never materialize. The cost far outweighs the value and HRM taxpayers are getting. Comes from Jonathan. Look, folks, I've said this a number of times, probably too many times on the show, but I understand that people who call in talk radio or want to send emails are generally not supportive of something. That said, though, folks, it's not a gauge that should be ignored, or it's not a voice that should be ignored. And I think that in this case, people who I talk to, people who send me emails, look, I've been inundated with people who have been vehemently opposed to the construction of bike lanes without any guardrails in place. And I think that's justified. I think the idea that ideologically we have to forge ahead no matter what, as some members of council would have liked, I think is dangerous. And I think that it's always prudent for anybody who has control over the purse strings of the taxpayer, exercise fiscal prudence whenever possible. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That said, look, folks, that's not the be all and end all when it comes to fiscal or when it comes to policy, but it certainly needs to be a big component to it. Kim's giving us a call. Hello, Kim.
Hello, how are you?
Well, you?
I'm driving through Bears Lake, listening to you.
Okay.
And I felt sorry for the woman living in Cole Harbour, working in the South End for the 35 years driving back and forth.
Yeah.
I actually had a nice job, really nice job over in Burnside. I live in Harrietsfield. I actually quit my job to get a job closer to home because of the stupid bridges. So for 35 years, just imagine how much money she spent on gas and tokens.
Yeah.
Factor that in with her time wasted driving back and forth. I either would have quit the job and found something closer to home, or I would have said to my husband, honey, we got to move. Because that's one of those things that you have to decide on your own what you're willing to give up or not give up.
That's true.
So
That's true.
You know, too many winter storms, stuck in traffic trying to get to Burnside, and I would come home and I'd be 2 hours late or whatever.
Yeah.
I said, enough of this, honey. I'm quitting that job and I'm getting something closer to home.
Yeah.
So, again, I appreciate the fact that maybe bike lanes are fun, and I use the word fun. I don't think of them as something that we can consider a possible solution to the driving. There's just no way. The train tracks we had that were all around the city, outside the city, do that, but you know, no, the bike lanes are not a necessity to get back and forth to work. They're just for fun, and that's all I feel about that.
Okay, Kim,
so.
Thanks for the call. Take care. I don't agree that they're just for fun. I think they can certainly be used and are used for utilitarian purposes for getting to work. A lot of people, that's their mode of transportation. But for some people, it is purely recreational. And look, it's good to have recreational avenues and opportunities in any municipality. And look, I get it that it's a nuanced conversation. But again, just forging ahead for the sake of doing it no matter what with the blinders on, I think that was wrong. And I think that this motion is I'm certainly pleased that it passed. To Gloria's point, why did the mayor's motion not pass? I think that's a good question. 902-405-6000. Owen, hello.
Hi, Todd. Todd, relative to net metering, years ago, I worked with one of the first companies that was involved in alternative energy, wind turbines, solar panels, etc. And one of my responsibilities was to submit single-line diagrams to Nova Scotia Power for net metering. And what I would like to do is, my telephone number is 902-292-5000. And if anyone would like to have questions answered relative to the implementation and involvement of net metering, I would be more than willing to answer them.
Okay, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Take care. Good luck. This email from Moshe says, I'm a regular listener. My power bills are twice everyone else in the area with a similar house. There are 3 of us in the house. Had 2 electricians in, home assessment by Efficiency Nova Scotia. No one can explain any reason for the high use. Installed 2 heat pumps, used a pellet stove in the winter. Daughter built a house and moved in with her husband, and baby power bill didn't go up. This all started years before smart meters. Nova Scotia Power won't do a thing. Electrician thought there could be an issue with grounding coming into the house or transformer. No help. 800 bills, $800 in the summer, $900 in the winter. Interesting email. This part of this email from Aaron says, listening to Tony Mancini, the motion was ridiculous. I guess we're supposed to applaud the win. And bike lanes for commuting are one thing, and the AAA network, all ages, abilities is another. Biking in a city is not for everyone, a very narrow niche, I would say. Unless the bike lanes can transport as many humans as transit buses or cars, they should not create more of them. If people want to bike for recreation, there are trails for that. I see people often have no business being on a bike in Halifax. One needs to be fit and physically able to bike while with traffic and navigate city streets, ideally with a properly equipped mode of transport. Bikes and scooters are transportation and rules should apply. The notion that cyclists should not be licensed because no one will use them or will use the bike lanes is cringeworthy. That's part of a long email from Aaron. And I appreciate you sending it along. Thanks for the calls, everybody. Thanks for all the emails as well. It's appreciated. And again, we will open the phone lines again tomorrow between 11 and 12. A programming note tomorrow, by the way, we'll have Steve Murphy, our friend Steve Murphy, of course, friend of the show, will join us from 10:30 to 11. So always look forward to my chats with Steve Murphy. And again, we'll take your calls between 11 and 12. And our Ask the Vet segment goes tomorrow from noon until 1 as well. Always popular Ask the Vet, so lots of fun tomorrow and on tap. Thanks to Vanessa Van Den Ness on the other side of the glass. The control board's doing a fine job as always. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.